I am Eva Biudet. I am an old politician. I've been in parliament, in the Finnish parliament since 1991, since many of you before you have been born have worked with some of you, because I also have been in between. I was the minority ombudsman, and I've also been working for the OSCE in Vienna, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, where I worked as a special representative for combating human trafficking. So I've been doing a lot of things. I also been very active in different NGOs, and but in all my efforts, I think I've been working very strongly for human rights, for minority rights, for women's rights, children's rights, whatever, refugee rights. Always thinking that these are, in any society, the smallest member or the smallest group deserves more attention, because that's actually how you measure the prosperity or well-being of the society, where people who are not big by numbers also can feel that they belong and can make choices and do what everybody else can do. Dear ladies and gentlemen and everybody, I think this is a fantastic occasion. I think one of the good news, and we already spoke about it earlier on here, is that in Finland in particular, and I don't know about Sweden and Norway, who has a much stronger multicultural tradition and background, but in Finland we now see that there are a lot of organizations coming up among minorities, and I think, and in particular among people with migrant backgrounds. We have the second and third generation people who are now creating space for them in these societies, making an impact, making their voices heard. And I think this is a very good piece of news, because all societies need people to work together in organizations, and collaboration within borders, across different kind of borders. We have the Nordic theme today. I'm also a member of the Nordic Council, where actually the parliamentarians from the Nordic countries meet to learn from each other, also to tackle common problems and to be stronger in the global scene together. And I think this Nordic connection is not always seen as so important, but I will tell you that if you look globally, the Nordics together make a big impact in many, many cases, in particular in the UN or in the international sort of norm-based collaboration, because we are very strong sort of supporters for democracies, for the rule of law, the treaties, the human rights. And I think it's important that we treasure this together. So I think there's an added value to being a Nordic, not only to be a Finn or a Swede or a Norwegian or a Somali, but I think to have this Nordic also within us, which you all have, I think is an extra added value. And indeed, the world needs you today. The world needs you very, very much, because the world is in trouble. We have actually existential challenges, both on a global scale, on the global scene, but also long term. And now I'm not talking about violence or wars. I'm talking about, for instance, the environment, climate, things that we need to work together to solve. And of course, the consequences of climate change and for instance, the decreasing biodiversity is felt in our countries in different ways, but it is felt already in many parts, and in particularly in countries in the global south have extra hard felt the bad consequences. But also here in Europe, in the Nordics, we feel the consequence. We need to be able to put our resources to work on that together. But of course, we also have a broken political system on many levels. And we also feel it here in the Nordics. And I think you have felt it particularly hard because sort of the atmosphere, political atmosphere has sort of turned inwards much more from before. When I was a young politician, where we actually felt that we also want to, our goal was to work together on global issues, and we want to be open for dialogue, open for migration, open for exchange of science and of students. And today, also Nordic countries and European countries, but also countries of the global south actually are looking very much inwards. And I think this is something that we need to fix. You need to fix it, and I need to fix it. We need to start thinking about working together again. It's necessary for our common globe and our countries, wherever we are from. The rule-based world we have built up is also threatened in practice because of big states. Also, the Nordics are withdrawing, for instance, development aid a lot, and their inputs to the common structures that actually are monitoring, for instance, human rights. And, in my youth, when I was studying law, I actually imagined the future that there would be a UN that would be able to solve international conflicts, that would be solve poverty in countries, that would help countries for developing in democracy and so forth. And today we see that it doesn't happen by itself. It actually can go backwards. So you are very much needed on wherever you are to work on a more positive, building society, building collaboration, building possibilities and opportunities to young people in Somalia, in the Nordics, wherever you are. And of course, I think it's important also to remind yourself that you are special in many ways. You have skills and experiences with multi-layered identities. You have multicultural skills that are deeply necessary today. People without multicultural or multilateral connections in their life lack skills that are necessary today. And I think to have this within yourself, with your life experience, but also with what you're working with, is actually something that is giving you an added value in today's world that is deeply needed. We, of course, are recognized that being here, you all have overcome a lot of challenges, and that still the challenges are facing you. And I think that we would need your voices to be better, at least in the Finnish society, to make it a better society for people also with Somali background, because we know that, for instance, racism is a big, big issue. And I think it's, in particular for children, it's unreasonable that children should face it when they grow up in a country like Finland or Sweden. I think the Nordic connection, with all these faults we have and recognizing them, has also many advantages for you to cherish and take with you where you go. I think about the trust that we somehow have in society, in institutions, and I hope that you also can feel the peace, the equality, women's situation, gender equality, but also of all kinds of minorities. This feeling of Nordics should also, and it must also be one belong to you. I think that's something that you can take with you wherever you go. Because we have also shown in the Nordic countries that this is a way for economic prosperity, for well-being, and for good societies. And your children, of course, we need to assure them that they can grow up with a belonging both in the Nordics and in the world in the same way as any other kid. And the Somali background you share, let it also be your asset. And let it be something in your core identity that you are proud of, that gives you a larger perspective and more connections in the world. In the world, the Nordic Somali identity can be a winner, where you can pick best parts of all your background experiences and your traditions and your cultures. And it is okay to choose. You don't have to carry things you think are bad. I think this is important. Sometimes when you're a minority, you think that you have to guard everything. But every generation carries their own heritage to the next generation. And it's important for us to think about what we want to give to the next one. What are the fine parts, the best parts? What can I pick from here and there? And I can be proud of it and say that this is something is building on earlier generations. Of course, the Somalian situation today is really, really challenging. And I just saw, and I know that you have a IOM representative today speaking to you, and I saw that they are really bigger again, the refugee numbers, not particularly into the Nordics, but perhaps into Germany, Netherlands, other countries. And I really deplore, for instance, that the Finnish government has paused, I wouldn't say paused, not stopped, but paused development cooperation to Somalia, because I think even if it was small, it was big, and it gave also a platform for other cooperation, for business connections and for organization connection. And I hope that we will be able to find that connection and to restart that again. And I think we cannot afford to give space to perhaps more immoral or terrorist or violence that will come and fill these spaces where sort of democratic development escapes. I belong to a language minority in Finland. And I don't know, at least Rukia doesn't probably know that Finland has two official languages, Swedish and Finnish. And if you would have asked me as a Swedish-speaking Finn what would have been the word, I would have said kärlek. I tried to make the Norwegians say kärlek. That's love, because I think that's something we actually need to learn that is important. And I think kärlek is a very good word because actually it's a common word with Norwegian, with Danish and Swedish. And I think that the Somalis in Finland in particular, you need to remember that the Swedish language may be a door to the Nordics. So that don't let your children skip the Swedish lessons in school. It's an easier language than Finnish, but it still is a good connector to the Nordics and opens door. And it reminds a little bit more of English and everything. So, and of course, many of you speak so many languages. So, I mean, sometimes we hear in Finland that, it's unnecessary to learn the small language because it makes it difficult to learn more. But of course, all of you who know many languages know that this isn't true. It isn't true. So this is just a little reminder that it is opening doors to the Nordics. And I also know that in Finland, where we only are 5% of Swedish speakers, we also have learned that for strengthening the Swedish-speaking culture in Finland, we cannot close our doors to the rest of the world. We need to be in constant interchange and intercultural change with others. And changing our culture doesn't mean it diminishes, it strengthens us. We have a lot of authors in Swedish and coming from this little group. And it doesn't really make us smaller to be part of the bigger world. And closing doors actually for a culture means stagnation and going backwards, and it's never good. But sometimes it's the gut reaction when you feel that there are sort of too many changes in a way coming up to you. But I don't think it's a good lesson in any situation. And of course, as a minority, I also have learned, and I try to teach my kids and my younger politicians, that when you are in politics, in a society, there's also a lesson learned in being a minority. It is the knowledge of how it feels to be a little bit an outsider, to be a little bit different as a group, and not always to be remembered, sometimes to be harassed and discriminated upon. And I know you know that very well. But I think that when you work further. You can also feel that this being a minority experience is also like a gift. It's teaching you how to deal and how to treat other people who are different. And I think if you don't use it also for other minorities and other groups who are minorities, you are not actually cherishing the gift you have had by learning this experience. I also know that many of you have many times been the first of everything. And I think it's actually rather astonishing in a perhaps a little bit sad way that in Finland, after perhaps more than 30 years of Somalians in Finland, that we have had the first woman who actually took her PhD just a few weeks ago or a month ago. I mean, and I think that's fantastic. But of course, we need to see that would happen more. Education is, of course, for all. And I think that it shows that we have a new generation that doesn't stay behind, that wants to be there, sharing the same values as all the others in this country. Lastly, I just want to say that in Parliament, I have recently established the Somali Friendship Group. It's we haven't done so much, but the idea of this, we have these different kind of friendship groups with different countries in the Parliament, is to have contact, of course, with the parliamentarians in the other country. And I think it would be really important that also the other Nordic parliaments would have Somali friendship groups. Because, as you know, it's also always different when you meet somebody who works with the same things as you do. Even when you come from a different country, you share things and you can sort of learn from each other in a different way. So I think that would be a marvelous way of learning more about Somalia and from the Somalia politicians to learn more about the Nordics. It's also a group that wants to have information from the diaspora. So we want to have good connections to the diaspora because it's important that you are telling us. And of course, it's also perhaps a little reminder that the parliament is there and politics is there for you to take. I know that many of you have been active in politics, and we have in particular on the local level, and we have indeed here one from Stockholm, a successful politician, but I think it is important also to take part in the society building in that sense that you are supporting and working for a stronger democracy who also hears the voices of minorities, of the Somali background people, and from that experience. I hope that you will have a fantastic and good exchange and a sincere exchange about challenges and hopes and dreams and practical things to work on today. And that this is the first, I understand, conference of its kind, and I think that this will not definitely be the last one. I think the Nordic connection is actually a very good sort of added thing that you will all be able to cherish. I know that many of you have families in different countries, also in the Nordics, so it's not so difficult. So I hope that you will really have a good meeting today and a conference. And please remember that we are here to build a better world for ourselves, for our kids, for our children, but also for everybody who cannot speak, who don't have a voice. Thank you so much.